Well, Joe, I think, when you announced on your program with the interview with me several months ago, you said, look, I don't think we can beat this at the center, but I think we can beat this one city at a time. And you appealed to people who wanted to get it out of the city to contact us. That was the, what do you call that? Tidal change,
Hmm.
because we've had so many good people coming into it. So good activists, professionals, all kinds of citizens saying, I want it out of my town. And of course, we've now got a campaign manager who, once they say, I want it out of my town, he can provide them with a packet of information of how to go about doing this. So I think it was your call to arms a few months ago, which has really signaled this tidal change.
Yeah, I think what we were looking at is what's called a tipping point, and
Yeah.
we're seeking to find out which of the initiatives or that we're involved with that's going to succeed. And I think looks like you're the leading horse at this point to have our mission, one of our mission goals accomplished, which is to remove fluoride from the North America. So I want to thank everyone who helped participates in this process, and then also encourage to help people understand this battle is not yet won. You've heard the tremendous victories that Paul's been able to achieve through his efforts and locally working together. So this is the time that you want to get together and work and continue, because the battle's not over. We've got a large number of other ones, as you mentioned, New York City. So what can the listeners do to help you with your process?
Well, I think the first thing to recognize is, although this is incredibly difficult at the corrupt center of our government, it's very, very difficult to move the center because there's so much money and so much influence there. But winning it one town at a time, you've got to remember, this is as easy to stop this practice as turning off a tap. But to turn off that tap, you need political will. If we have the political will in our communities, we can turn that tap off. But to turn that tap off, we have to have people informed, and we have to have people organized. And that's what this Facebook and Twitter and all these other things are doing, is to help people get informed. They've got the videotape, professional perspectives on water fluoridation. They should make as many copies of that as they possibly can and give it to everybody, their friends, their relatives, their dentists, their doctors, their politicians. And then they've got the book. Hold that book up and say, look, there's 80 pages of scientific references in here. Stop telling me there's no debate. Stop telling me that all the scientists in the world think that fluoridation is the best thing since sliced bread, because it's all documented in this book that it isn't. And this book was written by 3 scientists, a physicist with an MD, a biologist, and a chemist. Don't tell me they're flaky tunes. These are qualified scientists who spent several years in their retirement to look at the science from top to bottom, and they've thoroughly documented everything. So until you've got a cogent response to this book, stop insulting opponents and get on with trying to answer the serious scientific questions that they've asked.
Okay, well, that's certainly a good start. So what are the next initiatives? I mean, do you have an active group now in New York that's seeking to expand the legislation that was proposed by the one legislator? And then are there other communities where people can start to join and get their community to exclude fluoride from the water supply?
Yes, both. Carol Kopf, the wonderful spokesperson for the New York State Coalition Opposed to Fluoridation, she is collecting all the names. I think she's got over 100 people now that are dedicated to trying to get out of New York City, and a lot of well-wishers outside New York City. Carol Kopf's email is NYS, standing for New York State, NYSCOF, Coalition Opposed to Fluoridation, NYSCOF at AOL.com. So if you want it out of New York City, contact Carol Kopf. If you want it out of anywhere else, either go to our webpage and you'll see a list of all the contacts around the country, by state, by town, and our wonderful campaign. We are so blessed, Joe, to get a wonderful, young, dynamic campaign manager. We've never had a campaign manager before, and he's based in New Hampshire, and his name is Stuart Cooper, and you can reach him at stuart@fluoridealert.org. And if I've got that right, it's either stuart@fluoridealert.org or stu, S-T-U, @fluoridealert.org. But if not, just contact, go through the web page. And one of the things that Stuart is trying to do, in addition, of course, where we have the light, a little ray of hope, light in a community that they might actually take it out. Meanwhile, we're asking communities to get their water departments to put on the bill, the water bill, what the American Dental Association has said to its members, but not to parents. Parents making up baby formula should not use fluoridated water. You should be using mineral water, distilled water, but not tap water to make up baby formula. Even at the lower 0.7 parts per million, which is the new recommended level by the CDC, even at 0.7, a bottle-fed baby is getting 175 times more fluoride than a breastfed baby. And now we know that we have 24 studies, which indicate that fluoride is associated with the lowering of IQ. And the latest one, Joe, from Ding and co-workers, just published a couple of weeks ago in the Journal of Hazardous Materials. Ding and co found a lowering of IQ at low levels, not moderate, not high levels, low levels. The range of the water in the children that they studied was between 0.3 and 3 parts per million. So we're within that range in our communities, and they were able to correlate the level of fluoride in the urine, which tells you is a measure of individual exposure to fluoride, the level in the urine. There was a very strong linear correlation with that lowering of IQ and fluoride concentrations in the urine.
What was the average amount of IQ lowering and that was observed in the studies? And then if you also could comment on the other component, which is it's more of a cosmetic issue, but the discoloration of the teeth, which right now 40% of the children under 16 have it. And if these infants are fed, we don't recommend giving formula, first of all, of course. We recommend breast milk. But for those who choose to use reconstituted infant formula, which is really a poor choice, but if they're using fluoridated tap water, they're going to, or what's your percentage of, is it over 50%, 75% they're going to have discolored teeth?
Well, yes, this was the bombshell that the Center of Disease Control dropped on January the 7th. They've been promoting fluoridation for years, and when they started fluoridation, they thought they could limit this discoloration of the enamel to 10% of the kids in its very mild form. And on January the 7th, they said 41% of all American children. That includes kids in fluoridated and kids in non-fluoridated communities. So the levels are higher in fluoridated communities, but 41% of children between 12 and 15 have this dental discoloration, damage to the enamel. And not all of it in the very mild, 28% in the very mild, 9% in the mild, and 3.6% in either moderate or severe. So, of course, they're only concerned about teeth. We know that. Teeth, and teeth. That's all they study. That's all they think about every day, as if we were a mouth full of teeth with little legs on. But for the rest of us who are concerned about what else the baby has, including their endocrine system, their bones, and their brains, we're concerned of what it means to a bottle-fed baby to get 175 times more fluoride than nature intended. And the message is coming through from China, India, and Iran, and Mexico. And there's another study from Mexico, incidentally, that found that the association with fluoride exposure and visual spatial learning, which isn't totally IQ, but it's part of mental development. So you've got another study there. They're just ignoring this. That's their way of handling this data. And what parent in their right mind will put the interest of their children's teeth, even if it worked, above the interest of their brains? I mean, it's literally a no-brainer, isn't it? And what government would put reducing the tooth decay by, on average, of the American population by at most 0.6 of one tooth surface, their own data, largest survey ever done in the United States, a saving of 0.6 of one tooth surface was not statistically significant and didn't allow for delayed eruption of teeth, but let's give it to them, 0.6 of a tooth surface if you are running the risk of lowering the IQ of the population by even a small points and in a small number of points. In fact, what they showed, what Ding and others showed, was that for each 1 part per million of fluoride in the urine, there was a lowering of IQ by 0.59 IQ points. Now that doesn't sound much, but when you shift the IQ of the whole population over, it's not what the average person looks like, it's what the tails look like. You will reduce the number of geniuses in your society, and you will double the number of mentally handicapped. And believe you me, in a competitive world, you want all the geniuses that you can get, and you want to minimize the number of children who are, having to be treated for mental development problems. So this is very, very serious. But it's even more serious, I believe, that the government continues to push this in the face of this evidence. And I go back to the beginning. The only way that you can rationalize so much irrational behavior by our prestigious health and professional agencies is it's become more important for them to protect this practice than it has to become to protect the health of our people. And that's the real shocker in the fluoridation story.
It absolutely is, and it's just, it is shocking because they certainly don't have a holistic perspective. They're looking at the teeth, and they're ignoring the rest of the body. It's the last thing a holistic approach would recommend. So and adopt.
They're not even looking at the teeth properly.
Yeah, but even if you give them that, and and we know, I mean, you've documented this really clearly, or helped expose the documentation and bring it to light that this is just a flawed approach, even with the teeth. But even if you give that to them, it doesn't make any sense from a rational perspective of trying to optimize human health, from a public health perspective, which is what the whole initiative is to improve the public health. They're destroying the public health. It almost seems like it's a deliberate dumbing down of the entire culture. I mean, if you go to a conspiracy perspective, you certainly can make an argument for it, and I'm not saying it is, but it would certainly provide support for that.
Now, I don't go there. I don't think there's any maliciousness involved, certainly not at the rank and file, the doctors and dentists who don't have time to read the literature, the people in the middle who would lose their jobs if they came out against fluoridation. The people at the top have machinations, but I think it's a combination of liabilities and losing credibility and threatening these multi-million-dollar programs like vaccination. So I don't see a sinister plot. Well, I think that's pretty sinister. I think it's pretty sinister, but it's almost like human nature. Most people do not like to admit that they were wrong. And a bureaucracy is the last thing they want to do, is to have people questioning their credibility. So I think that's the way I see why they're fighting like tigers to keep this thing going. But it's up to the public to tell them, this is unacceptable. You've just got to admit when you've done things which are wrong. This is what we teach our kids, right? We tell our kids, you got to come clean, you got to admit, and then you got to apologize.